Now this video I want to show you how to make the perfect creme brulee with a tip that I learned at Marco Pierre White in his 3 Michelin star restaurant in London. And I still remember the first time I tasted creme brulee. I was around 27 years old and it was on one of my many trips to Paris to eat and explore French food. And that trip I planned to go to Fouchon, which is the gourmet food emporium, and I wanted to purchase the new book of Pierre Hermier, who was the head pastry chef at Fouchon and sort of one of the young and upcoming chefs in the French food scene. Now, when I arrived with my friend, we sort of decided to order creme brulee to see how it was really done, and just to check out how good it can be. Now what sort of arrived was a really delicate custard in a shallow fluted dish, which was sort of topped with a sheet of burnt sugar, and sort of after firm rub with the back of the spoon, the crust just shuddered beautifully, and the custard underneath was sort of just obscenely good. It was such a sublime contrast, and each bite was sort of crunchy, smooth, toasty and lush. It was a true revelation. And for as long as I can remember, creme brulee has been a classic, so I assumed it has been a famous French dessert, because the name after all means burnt cream in French. But after sort of, I wanted to explore a bit further, and it turns out it's not so French after all. Apparently burnt cream was already a dish that the Romans used to make, and they made sort of an unsweetened or sweetened custard, and then they sprinkled it with some hot tasting spices, and that burned their mouth. The person who ate it burned their mouth. Hence it was named burnt cream. Now to sort of see examples of similar desserts go back to as far as apparently the 15th century in England, when cows were calving and producing an abundance of ultra-rich milk. And that apparently was the season for burnt cream, which is a sweetened pudding, which is also known as the Trinity cream, which I will show you in one of my other videos. Now the first printed recipe for creme brulee is almost identical to today's version, and it was first published in 1691 by François Massy-Hallot, who cooked at the courts in Versailles in Paris. And then in Spain, obviously, you have the creme catalana, which is a custard topped with caramelized sugar, which apparently dates back as far as medieval times. Now, it's from that Spanish dessert, apparently, where creme brulee came out and sort of conquered the whole world, because the owner of Le Cirque, Cyril Marchionni, which is another 3 Michelin star restaurant in New York, says he took his inspiration for his creme brulee. That sort of kicked off the current global trend, and he experienced that dish in the 80s in Spain, and Marchionni insisted that his version was developed specifically in New York at his menu, and the pastry chef at that time, which was Dieter Schoner, he put sort of his own spin on the custard, cooking it in a shallow fluted dish, and the sugar shell on the top got thinner too, and it sort of obviously was franchised in becoming, known really French, because it was a French restaurant. And when Paul Bocuse visited Cyril Marchionni at Le Cirque, he loved the dish so much that he declared that it is the best dessert he has eaten that whole year. And throughout then, with Paul Bocuse coming back to France, it sort of really kicked off in Europe as well. And creme brulee, as it is today, apparently is known in France only since the 1980s, or reinvented since the 1980s. Now, interestingly, creme brulee has a history in the New United States as well that predates Le Cirque. And Thomas Jefferson apparently was serving it in the White House already, and recipes appeared in cookbooks and magazines throughout the 50s and 60s. And yeah, today then, and in the 80s, sort of creme brulee definitely became the darling of the restaurant boom. And today you have thousands of copycats And it's now a staple in almost every decent and good restaurants. And the variation, or the flavor variation, you know, they range from mint to pumpkin to foie gras, pistachio, just literally any flavor that you can imagine. However, there's lots and lots of bad versions on the internet and cookbooks too, and although it's such a simple dish to cook, it seems that less and less people manage to cook it successfully. While the sugar crust on the top is what I often see is another story. It's a total disaster, as you know, blowtorching your custard for long periods simply doesn't work. It's too aggressive. It often burns the surface of the custard if it's not properly covered with sugar. If the sugar is too thick, you can't melt it. And in worst case, then you just keep blowtorching and you heat up the creme brulee from the top too much that you warm it up. It loses its texture, and in worst cases, you even start cooking it. However, after you watch this video, my video, this will be no longer a concern for you, as I will show you every trick and give you every tip to completely succeed on every level with the caramel crust and the creme brulee. And you don't even gonna need a blowtorch, as I learned to cook it myself in that way when I was the head chef at the 3 Michelin star chef Marco Pierre White in London. So enjoy the video. So first, for a recipe like that, you need to have the right mold. So what is the right mold? Something like you see here, that's not the right mold, simply because it's too deep. So you need to think about it, that if I put my custard in there, I will create almost like an air bubble on the top, a cold air bubble. So the heat's not going to get in from the top. So basically, I'm not going to be able to cook the creme brulee evenly. So that's not what you see in French cooking. So what you need to have is a much more shallow dish. Now I can fill it up, but always need to think that the water needs to be as high as the custard in the center. But again, that mold is not ideal. So what is the ideal mold? Something like that, a shallow dish. The heat can go straight in. There's no cold air bubble trapped on the top for a long time until it eventually warms up, where you often will see that the custard cooks underneath, but it doesn't cook on the top, or vice versa. So that's the right dish. That's what you're going to see in France. That you also see that there's creme catalana and all the other dishes. So the high molds, they do not work. So next thing you do, you preheat your oven to 130 or 125 degrees Fahrenheit. You place the water on it. You need to preheat your molds. You need to preheat the oven, you need to preheat everything. You don't want to end up juggling those molds into the oven from the top. So what we will do, we will fill it in with the jug. So make sure that the oven is hot, the water is hot, the molds are hot, and that you make sure that the molds are basically filled up at least halfway through with that hot water. If you have one of those higher molds you saw in the video here, it needs to be filled up all the way as high as you're going to fill the custard inside. Otherwise, if you have half the custard sticking out of the water, or the mold, half the mold sticking out, half the mold in the water, it will not cook evenly. So then you separate the eggs. So in my case, I have some 6 egg yolks, I have some vanilla bean. Now when you use vanilla bean, you also need to make sure that you use everything. There's more flavor in the vanilla shell than there is in the seeds. Too many chefs or too many cooks today tell you to just use the seeds. The seeds look pretty, but the flavor is in the shells. You could also take that shell out afterwards, wipe the cream off, put it in the freezer, use it a second time. There's so much flavor in the shell, and it's a real waste, because you know vanilla beans are really expensive. Vanilla essences or whatever you buy, they don't have the real flavor. So just scrape out the seeds, put them into your custard, and boil the shell out as well. So that's where all the flavor is. So place that into a pot and then get some cream. So if you use double cream, you're gonna have to use 80% double cream and 20% milk. If you use thickened cream, like I do today, you use just straight thickened cream, because thickened cream is usually thickened with gelatin or alginate, so it's a bit thicker, where double cream is obviously much richer, so you have to dilute it a little bit with milk. So then you bring that to the boil. Add some sugar. Don't add too much sugar, because think about it, you will have that sugar crust on the top, so just sweeten it very lightly. Of course, if you want to put other other flavors in there, you do that now. Then you bring it to the boil, and then you let it stand for around 15 to 20 minutes so that the vanilla can really infuse the flavor into it. So while that happens, I want to show you something else. I want to show you that trick where I told you that you do not need a blowtorch for this recipe. You can actually make the caramel separate, and then you can just finish it off either with a blowtorch, which will only take you 1/10 of the time and you will not overheat the custard, or you can actually cook it under the grill element in your oven. So all I do here, I play a bit around with it. I'm just going to get a nice round sheet of paper out of this, which you also call in French cooking a cartouche, you know, if you're into French cooking. I want to learn more about it, check out my cooking school. So now the next thing is I heat up a pan, okay? So you need to make sure that your pan is sort of medium hot. Don't have it too hot, otherwise you burn the sugar. Then add the sugar to it. So don't make that mistake that you put a spoon in there now. Because if you put the spoon in there, you know what's going to happen. All the sugar that melts sticks to the spoon, and then you have that gigantic thick lump of sugar on your spoon. It takes you forever to get rid of it. So how do you clean a pan like that later on? You just put water in it, you let it stand for 15 or 20 minutes. You know, sugar dissolves in water and your pan is clean again. So all I do now, I just sort of toss it around. I don't try to stir that. Make sure that you have a thin layer of sugar, because that melts much more even. You can see now how the caramel sort of starts to develop, and this is a straight caramel, so if you start stirring it, you might also have some sugar crystals left. If I want to have a really clear, perfect caramel, I do not stir it. And also I just move it around, and eventually the sugar will reach the temperature that it melts all the crystals, and then you have a perfect caramel. And that's obviously something we need today. So what I do with that sugar later on, I will tell you a little bit. But what you can do also, you can flavor it. Like what I like to do with my creme brulee, depending on how I flavor it, you know, you could put some peanuts in there, and you could put some sesame seeds in there. You could put some spices in there as well if you want to do that, and then you obviously have that flavor in the caramel coating on the top as well. So you can see now the caramel is perfectly melted. So the next thing I do is I pour it out onto a tray, onto a mold. I wait until it gets cold. Now you have to be a bit careful with that, because that sugar attracts moisture from the air. So once it's cold, once it's really brittle and really hard, that's when you blend it up. You put it in an airtight container, or you can do that what I do here. And then you can store it literally for years. And then you basically have brought the sugar back to its original state. Just sprinkle it over your creme brulee, finish it off. But you see all of that. So now I take out the vanilla. I sort of have a heavily vanilla infused cream here now, and then while it's hot, and that's extremely important, you put the egg yolks in while it's hot. So don't make sure it's boiling hot, but I did let it stand for around 20 minutes. If you want to speed it up a bit, you can take the cream into a separate bowl just to chill it a bit further down, then add the egg yolks to it and mix it in, because you need to cook your creme brulee while it's hot. There's no point of making that custard, putting it in the fridge and then start cooking it from cold. It's going to take you forever. Now imagine in a restaurant, you don't have the time. I don't have the time to cook creme brulees for an hour and a half, because I need to cook maybe 20, 30, 50, depending on what sort of, I need an oven again, you know? So what you do, you fill the custard hot or hot-ish into the preheated molds. And if you do that with a jug, like you see me doing here, there's no spilling, there's no water going into the molds, everything is perfect. And in that way, you cook your creme brulee literally in 15 or 20 minutes. That's how easy it is. So it's the preheated molds, it's the warmed custard, and you can see now it's set, and that's the creme brulee. So it basically just took me 20 minutes to cook. So take it out, you can see it's wobbly, the surface doesn't break. If I touch the surface, it shouldn't break. If the surface breaks, but in my case it's a bit of custard, it obviously stuck a bit to my finger, then that's it. So perfect creme brulee. So now you put that into the fridge. And that's probably the longest thing that takes you, is to chill your creme brulee down. So while the creme brulee chills down, and if you want to obviously hurry it up, you can put it in the freezer for half an hour, you crush that sugar up. Okay, so crush that sugar up. I will put it in the blender, I'll blend it up all fine. If you don't have a blender, just keep doing what I do here, just sort of get it as fine as you can, and that is your sugar caramel. So if you do that for dinner party, can you see where I'm coming from? Creme brulee is ready, lasts in the fridge for a week. Sugar caramel is done. I mean, the worst thing you can do is have one of those tiny little blowtorches and start blowtorching around. Heat up the custard, start cooking the custard from the top. If your sugar is not thick enough, you know, the next thing what's going to happen, you're going to start burning, you know, the custards. So what you have here now, basically brought the sugar back in its original state. So when I want to serve that, all I do now is I put the sugar on the top. And if I want to have a really thick layer, I can do, obviously play around with that, but I can do a layer after layer. So now just spread that out, switch your grill element on if you don't have a blowtorch, and place the creme brulee right under the grill element. But I'm going to show you that with a blowtorch now quickly. So all I do now is, you see, I just touch it off. And because the sugar melts so quickly and it's caramelized already, there's no overheating of the custard, you know. I can make the nicest, thickest caramel layer that I ever want. And that's how I do creme brulee. That's how I learned it at Marco Pierre White's. It's a 3 Michelin star restaurant in London at that time. What we used to do, you see exactly what you see here, you do a double layer. And that was so amazing when I had that at Pierre at Fauchon in Paris. It just had this amazing crunch on the top, and through that is sort of it's absolutely perfectly caramelized. There's no need for you to shake it, to hold it, and you don't even need a blowtorch, as I said to you. So I hope you like my video. I hope you enjoy what you see here. If you do, please subscribe to my channel, check out my links below, and that's how you make your creme brulee. And you just could keep caramelizing and caramelizing, and as I said, add some flavors to it, you know, add some peanuts, sesame seeds, black sesame seeds, you know, spices, like you could add some lemongrass into your crust, lavender, and all those sort of things. I had made another one with chocolate. So what I do here now, under the grill element, so I switch the grill element on really high and just place the creme brulee just right under the grill element. I tell you, it's not going to take longer than 30 to 40 seconds. And here we go. That's how you make your creme brulee. Let me know if you have any questions. Look forward seeing you the next time, and just let's have a look at now how amazing that crust is. It's really hard, it's really crunchy, and I'm just gonna enjoy that now. So I'll be off and going, and just look at it, how amazing that sugar crust is on the top, and the custard underneath is just absolutely perfect.